All right. If everybody can please find their seats, we're going to go ahead and start the meeting. All righty, folks. Velma, if I can get a roll call.
Richard Farias, Lawson Picasso, Diana Martinez, Frank Gonzalez, Julian Villarreal, Adelita Cantu, John Kelly, Tom Corser, Vanessa Alvarado, Maria Nelson, Audra Capsaddle, Steve Bonnet, Bob Zapata, Aaron Stein, Christopher Fullerton, Sarah Villarreal, Frank Dunn, and Peter Onfray.
Awesome. Okay. And then if I can just please ask the staff to please lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise. Are they going to put the flag? We'll go ahead and get started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, guys. And if I can just keep everybody standing for a minute, I would just like to take a moment to also give a moment of silence for those that were heavily impacted by the flood. Thank you. I read on social media the other day that it's like you don't really understand a moment of silence until you are hit with the gravity of not having words. And so this week, I did hold my son a little closer. And so I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that there's a lot going on. Okay, and then do we have an invocation?
We thank you for the many blessings you have freely given to each of us. We ask for your presence to guide this meeting of the Community Input Committee. Provide them with knowledge, compassion, and wise counsel needed as they discuss the business matters on the agenda today. Help us all to remember that we are stewards acting on behalf of our customers, and provide us with the grace to serve all people well. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Alrighty, and then I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Christina for public comment.
So public comment is done every meeting to give the public an opportunity to speak to the CIC. It is an opportunity for the public to, again, express their feelings. It is not meant for any rebuttal from the CIC, only to give the public an opportunity. And we have one public speaker today, and that is Dee Dee Balmares. And while Dee Dee's making her way up to the podium, I did want to let everybody know that we do have a Board of Trustees opening. And I apologize for the extra noise. Better than me than you.
1 yard of tape, 1 yard of string, and a marshmallow. The marshmallow has to be on top. And though it seems really simple, it's actually pretty hard.
I don't know what marshmallow challenge is happening right now, but I'm a little interested. I didn't see that on the agenda.
It is missing, but we should have added it, my fault, amongst other things. Okay, so I'm going to talk over the marshmallow, the marshmallow topic that's going on.
Exercise that reveals very deep lessons about the nature of collaboration, and I'd like to share some of them with you. So,
I don't know how to turn that off.
People begin by orienting themselves to the task. They talk about it. They figure
It's next door.
out what it look like. They jockey for power. Then they spend some time planning, organizing, sketching. They lay out spaghetti.
They're making spaghetti next door.
Their time assembling the sticks in the ever-growing
Well, if I can talk over this gentleman, we do have an opening on our Board of Trustees. Information is available at the CPS Energy website, and I would encourage anyone who is listening to get on that website, look and see if you are in Quadrant 2, because it is Quadrant 2 that is available, and apply. We would like anyone from the community who has an interest in public service to apply for this position, and we'd love to see all of the applications start coming in as soon as possible. So with that, I apologize, Ms. Balmares. You get 2 minutes. Can we put 2 minutes on the clock? Maybe. And you go right ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dee Balmares. I'm a clean energy advocate with Public Citizen, and I want to talk to you all about a couple of agenda items that y'all will be discussing today. First, CPS Energy's market update and generation plan, where it states beginning this fall, we will be refreshing our power generation plan with updated assumptions and information, and the CIC will be a key group for the input involvement. In 2022, CPS Energy and the Rate Advisory Committee worked on a mid-range generation plan to eliminate coal power generation, retire inefficient and outdated natural gas generation, and increase renewable energy sources of power. As CPS Energy faces increased electricity demand in the next 5 to 10 years, especially from large load customers like data centers, a regular update to their generation plan is necessary. This is an important utility practice. The generation plan should be a transparent process with deep stakeholder engagement. It cannot happen in the CIC secret subcommittee meetings. When CPS Energy runs the modeling and analysis, this should include input from stakeholders and community members. Stakeholders must have the information they need to engage effectively in this process. Finally, the resulting generation plan should be clearly communicated to customers, as this plan could potentially have bill impacts. As CPS Energy prepares for a robust generation plan, it should look at generation planning best practices outlined by groups such as RMI and Synapse Energy, leaders in this type of work. On near-term accomplishments, CPS Energy states that they're currently in negotiations for 50 megawatts of community solar. It's been over 3 years that STEP was extended, and community solar was one of its new offerings. Yet we still don't have a community solar program. Community solar can provide residents who have historically been unable to secure clean energy sources of power, so it's important that CPS Energy prioritize its completion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Balmares. And with that, I will turn the meeting back over to our chair.
Thank you so much. So as it's on the agenda during this section of it, we are going to be, I wanted to introduce to you guys, or reintroduce to you guys, a conversation about the bylaws. As I had mentioned at the very beginning of this CIC year, this was a new structure for CIC. So we wanted us to go in really understanding that we were having the training wheels on, with understanding what the new am I going out? The new structure was going to look like, and also for everybody to really have to take notes and digest the experience. So we understood what we needed to look at once the year came to a point, and we're at that point. I want you guys to know that the executive committee is going to start the review process of wanting to not redefine or recreate the bylaws. We have already been through that rodeo, and we're not going to do it again. But we want to make sure that we are being more definite in some of the definitions or the structure of what we want to see to bring clarity and to bring more cohesiveness to the CIC. So in this conversation, we will be looking at the bylaws to just bring more, extend the language and work with legal, work with our board. And right now, I also want to acknowledge we have our board chair in the audience with us, who has been very supportive of the CIC, and also wanting to ensure that we feel empowered and that the bylaws are something that is reflective of what the responsibilities are for this committee. So what the process excuse me. the process for this is going to be that we will, like I said, the executive committee is going to be reviewing this. However, I'm going to encourage every single committee member to please provide us with any suggestions, recommendations, background, experiences. I want to see it all. And the best way for us, what we are going to be doing, the official way that we are going to be reviewing all of this is by emailing that input to us. And I want to say, I don't know if it's on my notes, but there was an email given to all committee members to be able to send in that input. Only committee members will, suggestions, recommendations, and thoughts are going to be those considered for this. And I encourage you guys to do that. I want to give a timeline for this, and also based on how this conversation goes, what we're looking at as far as suggestions. At the discretion of that, will I see if we need to have a meeting from now before October, or if we can just, or if it's fine to wait till October. But we will, July 16th, CIC members will submit concepts for bylaws changes. By the July 23rd, executive committee meeting will meet to review the bylaws. And then July 25th, executive committee will notify the full CIC of bylaw concepts that will be reviewed and submitted by legal for redlining. And I think, hold on, here we are. August 13th through 31st, this is what I was mentioning, a special meeting for the CIC to take action on the redline bylaw document. So the CIC subcommittees meet on the 13th, and so we can either utilize that date for a full CIC meeting instead, or otherwise we can call a special meeting for something else in August. And then on September 29th, the Board of Trustees have their meeting. So I wanted to bring that to you guys so we can, so you guys could know that we are going to be looking at this, because I understand the bylaws conversation was something that consistently got brought up, and I want to make sure we are looking at it in a way that allows us to focus on what the intention of the CIC was for, and to make sure that we are we can feel confident about it moving forward. Like I said, it was year one. We were figuring it out, so now that we're in the trenches of it, it's time to go and zhuzh it up a bit. So I will open it up for comments and questions if you guys have any. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I think just on the meeting time, I think more frequent meetings, and looking at August, the sooner we can get in front of the items we have, the better. I think that's something that we felt as we're talking through our subcommittee meetings, that there's this disconnectivity isn't there. The cohesiveness of the overall group with the quarterly, and then with the being divided up with the subcommittees, although subcommittees can be productive in the time that we spend there. I think that's my feedback on the next step, is how soon can we get in front of the items, because we've got so much work to do, and I know we're going to hear briefings today that are going to enhance that even more. So being on the same page, I think, is critical right now.
Thank you, Peter.
Just a quick one to follow up, Peter. I think that's a great suggestion. But also, if you or others have been through the bylaws and have identified weak points or points at which we need some discussion, that would be great. Or versus just going through this, without that. I think that would be useful. If there are areas that need help, we should know about that.
No, I think that's a great. My mic keeps going in and out. Sorry, I keep sounding like a remix. So the intent tonight, and there was a request from both Steve and I for everybody to have the printed bylaws, so you guys have it. I am a paper person, for better or for worse. I need to see it, I need to hold it, I need to make my own red lines on it. So the intent is for you guys to look at this and based on the experiences throughout the year, to really understand, subcommittees have come up several times, right? And so I want us to really look to see where in the bylaws and the experiences that you guys have had, where you're not seeing that cohesion, and use everybody's favorite corporate America word, I'd like to see more synergy here. And so I encourage you to really to please help us in identifying where you're seeing some vagueness in the language, and how we can help to bring more definition to it that helps empower the experiences that we have been voicing we were expecting to have during this for this committee, and how we can ensure that this committee is set on a foundation that is going to bring success and opportunities for what the mission and the objective of this committee is supposed to be set forth for. Did I miss anything?
No, we can do executive
So now, yes, executive summaries for the subcommittee meetings. Do we want to do that? Want to start that now? Yeah. Okay.
real quick, and then we'll start presentations.
Okay. I don't. Steve, do you want to go ahead and give me do you have a update from your committee?
Do you have a copy of the executive summary? What I'd like to do is just, since I was gone for that meeting and Peter is my vice chair and he handled that meeting for me, I'm going to allow him to summarize what was discussed at the meeting. Do you have that? Okay. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, so at our Power and Technology Committee meeting, we received a briefing on what is the reliability must run, and it was very detailed in respect to the solutions that CPS or ERCOT was providing, short-term, long-term. And I would say I had heard about the solution of bringing in 15 generators into the system, and at 9 different sites, and those were shared as far as what the benefit would be to the community. And my understanding, I think this is what I pulled away from it, because when we talk about resiliency in the community and reliability and power outages and the extension of time, in that presentation, it was made very clear that this solution here would benefit the grid overall in a project that it's called the San Antonio South Resiliency Project, which is a transmission project, which is a bottleneck right now on the grid. And so being able to alleviate that, we were not allowed to close Bronick, and so that required us to have a backup solution. And that's what this agreement basically was telling us, is we're in agreement that we're going to keep it open until this short-term solution is achieved. And well, the short-term solution are the actual generators. So the generators being put in place so that if the power needs to be redirected, it could be redirected. Now, and just for clarification for those that I'm very much an advocate for the community resiliency plan that CPS has, and how they're making those changes to the system where they'll minimize the time of outage. This isn't directly for responding back to community. This is one of the things that I thought was very important, that we understand that when the community finds out that one of these generators is going to be placed in their community, what does that mean to them? And for us to understand that and to be able to communicate to them, this isn't going to help get the power back on for you directly because it's there for your purposes. It's there for the grid. And I thought that was important that we understand that. And one of the challenges I had and that I brought up there, and I'll bring it up here coming out of this presentation, was identifying where those generators were being placed. And I know Julian made some very poignant points about those generators, again, bringing more toxicity into a community and knowing where they would be in respect to a lot of the Southwest and the South have a lot of toxicity, and to bring another device there, though you may not think of it as in that respect, it does bring more toxicity to that community. And so I thought that was a really good point. And one of the questions that I asked, and I think this is kind of tied to where we can ask questions and get information that isn't privy to the whole community, is I asked, well, where are they going to be dispatched? And I was told, well, we can't share that with you because of security purposes, where they're going to be dispatched. And I understand that, and I respect that CPS has policies but I understand we also sign disclosure agreements. And I think this is back to the point of the subcommittee being almost an executive committee, if we're going to be able to ask those questions because they're not in public, and that's where information could be shared. If we didn't have that, we would call for an executive session, I would think, to be able to get that information. The reason I bring that up is for each one of us that represents a quadrant or a city council district to know where they're being placed is important, because I didn't get that information. I had to find out from the community. And so now, and there's communities that I visit with, and so for me to be there when they're discussing it is important if I know that they're one of the communities that is being impacted by it. And so that's my challenge to the group, to the administration, in respect to when we request something, where's the place that we can actually access the information if it's not there? And so that's my challenge. What I'll ask is, in respect to where they're being dispatched now, that it be disclosed to the committee members so that they can also be proactive in addressing the communities and letting them know. It was a much more detailed presentation. It was very, very well done. I mean, I learned a lot about the whole process, but I think that was my biggest takeaway, is how do we better represent the community in knowing that this is a positive, but someone's going to have to carry the load. And if it's not equally distributed across the city, we're going to have that pushback. And it's hypersensitive in the community, especially in the underserved communities, that you put another thing here and it's not equitable, for lack of a better word, across the entire area, we're going to get, it's going to be an issue. And what is a positive turns into a negative very quickly if we don't address that.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. And I'm going to save everybody the earache of singing Las Mañanitas, but happy birthday. Tom, I'm sorry. Yes, of course.
Hi, and I appreciate the feedback. We're always trying to figure out the balance between how we share as much information as possible while meeting the security standards that we're expected to meet. So I do want to give you guys some information that might reassure you. Anyone that is located within 1 mile of a location where the generators are being used was sent a letter. So all of the residents that are in 1 mile of a generator have received notice that they're there. So our goal is to let the community know if they are impacted. I don't want to leave you with the impression that that's not our effort. We have not released or listed a full list of these, and I do want to explain. I know when you hear security, I know not you all, but some people might think, oh, that's just a veto that legal or security uses to avoid disclosing information that may not be received positively. But I do want to explain to you all that for the locations where these generators are being added, it is essentially going to be a large construction site with very expensive equipment that is going to be open for a little bit as they install the generators. We already struggle with theft at our substations, with the security of those substations. It also is essentially a list of things that you would sabotage if you wanted to greatly impact the resiliency of the grid. And so while most people want this information for very positive reasons, there are folks that want it for nefarious reasons. So that's what we're trying to protect. I will look into getting a better balance of getting you all the information that you need, because you did sign non-disclosure, so I will look at that more closely. But I wanted to explain the concerns because it's always our goal to meet y'all exactly where we can meet you. I also just wanted to point out, with respect to the locations that were selected, this was not a CPS Energy project. CPS was given the directive to cooperate with ERCOT and with Life Cycle Power, which is providing the generators. They own and operate the generators. We do not. This is coming from a non-engineer, so I'm going to scare the folks behind me when I start talking about it. Engineering and physics picked the locations. Where the grid needs resiliency and transmission efforts to stabilize the flow of power, largely from the south to the north, is what determines the locations, not CPS Energy or who is located near those locations. I cannot deny where the locations are leaves folks with feelings. But I did, again, want to explain, we didn't pick the locations. Engineering and physics picks the locations. And it doesn't, while it doesn't do anything specifically for whether or not your power, if you're located within 1 mile of one of these generators, comes on faster or not, it does have a tremendous impact of whether or not there are forced outages across the entire ERCOT market that do, in fact, impact our CPS Energy customers. So this reduces that risk. So I could say to every customer that we have, doing this project reduces the risk that you will have forced outages, rolling brownouts in times where there are issues across the grid. So I wanted to reassure you as much as I could.
Thank you. Dr. Cantu?
Thank you for that explanation. So just two questions. So people within a mile radius of it got notified the generators coming in. Did people have any input at all relative? You're saying the engineers, it's an engineering issue. Was that conversation ongoing with the individuals, the people that live in that, within that 1 mile radius? Was there any communication with them other than, I just get a letter and I'm going to have a generation a mile away?
Because I make my chief customer officer really nervous when I talk about customer communications. She's coming to tap in to give you the best answer.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's important.
Please forgive me, I'm in my best conversion from field to office today, so good afternoon. For the letters that we received, there was an opportunity for those customers to reach back out to us, so we provided information. We didn't get a lot of feedback. I mean, some people were just talking about the company Lifecycle Power and asking questions about them, and fortunately, we had a contact information that we can send them over for Lifecycle Power, but aside from that, there wasn't a lot of general feedback that we got. There's very little. Melissa I don't know if we have the exact number.
Well, I'm wondering too if they may not have communication because it was already a done deal. It's going to be here. And so, people say, okay, why give any feedback to that at all? And the second question, I don't know if you can answer or anybody, but in terms of just thinking around economics. So if I have a house within a mile radius of a generator, what does that do to my property taxes, my appraisal, about selling it, et cetera?
I understand and appreciate the concern. I would say probably nothing.
Okay.
But if I got to pick what was around my house, I don't know that I would put my hand up for substation either.
Yeah.
I do want to stress that this is a temporary measure. We're expecting this to be a 2-year plan that will be shortened as soon as some of the transmission projects are completed, and then the generators will be removed. So again, apologies for the impact on the neighborhoods. I don't think that it will be severe. These will only run in emergency situations when called upon, and it will be a temporary measure. 2 years is looking like the maximum amount of time, and then everything will be returned to the way it looked before, and I think that we'll do everything that we can to minimize the impact on the communities.
Thank you for the questions. Before we go on with the rest of our executive summaries, I'm going to turn the floor over to our CEO because that's what you do when the CEO walks in.
How's everybody doing today? Good. I apologize. It's been a few meetings since I've been down here, but I knew y'all were going to be here today, and so I just wanted to come down and do a couple of things. Number one is thank you for the continued effort by this committee. I mean, you all make us better, and your input is appreciated and well received, and I hope you feel like we've created an environment where these conversations can happen in a productive way. So that's number one. And if you don't feel that way, then, get with me offline and we'll have that conversation too. I don't want to repeat anything because I know you all are more aware of where we are as an organization as probably any other group in our community because you're part of our team at the end of the day. But we just there's so much going on. I cannot think of a time in our industry where there's been so much transition and so much change, and the growth is exponential, and how we're going to meet it in a responsible way that takes care of our existing customers and takes care of the customers that we have to serve if they show up at our doorstep. It's a challenge. We're doing a lot of work this year to refresh our generation plan that Elena and Benny and the team are going to be working on, to refresh our Vision 2027 strategy that you all will have input into. But we've got so much investment to make in our generation, resources, in our transmission system, billions and billions and billions of dollars that is non-discretionary. I was just on a national press call thing that I was invited to do this morning, and the impact that we're seeing in San Antonio we're not special. Growth is happening everywhere. Resource, changes in our mix are happening across the country. I think we're in a pretty good place right now. I think we've got to stick with it and stay ahead of it, because the minute you stop making those investments, we're going to get behind. And once we get behind, we're going to stay behind. And so we got to figure out a way to do this in a way that takes care of customer affordability, but meets the billions of dollars that we've got to figure out. I feel confident that we're in the frame of mind to do the job that's ahead of us. I think we've got a board that understands the challenges. We've got a new council that we're working right now with to try to get them up to speed on the things they need to be thinking about as owners of this asset that we manage for the community. But we've gotten off to a good start. So far, the mayor's been real responsive, and she's had her first board meeting, and I think we've gotten off on the right foot, and I think that's a good sign for anybody curious about that. She's very responsive to me, and that's all I can ask for this early in the game. So anyway, I'm going to stop there and just see if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask me. Nope. Yeah, Peter.
Marie, first, thank you for establishing the transition for this group. And my question is, the value that you're seeing from the CIC reports that are coming to the board, and the work that, and I know we're getting information that's relevant to the vision of the work we're doing and trying to give feedback. And I know we've had structured meetings and we've given input, and I wanted to hear what your value that you're seeing from the group. And if I could be candid and share mine personally, that a lot of the requests that are made and the items that are here and in the subcommittee meetings aren't being recorded in meeting minutes or in the, well, won't call them meeting minutes, but in the reports. And that's a concern of mine in how we're being represented back to the board. So that's my personal opinion, and just what I saw with the RAC was much more cohesive in the work, and I felt like we were really helping the board to get what it needed from the community. And so just wanted to share that with you in public. I know you say get with you offline, but hey, there's no time like now.
No, look, the way that the reimagined committee was framed, was structured, was to mirror kind of the approach of our board. I know there's been a lot of conversation about the subcommittees. That is where we can give you unfettered information that comes back to this full body, for review and recommendation back to the board. So, I think we've tried to strike a balance. I know there are folks that think we should open up those committee meetings. Man, you know what? Our board has given you direction in a bylaw document, and if the board wants to change it, our board can change it. And by and large, that would be, informed by, the opinions of this body. But at the end of the day, you don't make any formal decisions. You make recommendations to the board for consideration. And I have not, we've had this conversation at the board level, and I have not heard, any feedback that suggests you're not doing your job at the end of the day. So, I don't know what the committee minutes look like versus what the RAC used to do, but I do know that, that not everything on the RAC was open to the public. So I don't know that we're that far off of what the RAC did. It's just structured a little differently.
Right, I don't want to extend this
Yeah.
any longer, but just to make this final point on that, because what was different with the RAC is that we had the liaison from the very beginning. We had Trustee Gonzalez, and we had Councilwoman Sandoval, and then, of course, it was the chair now,
Yeah.
Romero. And I thought that was very representative of, and I know that the CAC had discussed that at one point. So I think that's something personally that I would recommend, but that's what was different, I think, in the presentation.
Well, Peter, I don't know that you can get any better than having our chair sitting in the audience listening in. So I know she attends when she can, but I can guarantee you, we also have videos that are available for anybody who wants to go back, and watch, watch a committee meeting. So, again, I don't have any complaints, Peter. It's y'all's call, how, at the end of the day, how you operate, but I'm comfortable with where we are. Yeah. Any other? Yeah. Julian.
Yeah, it's more of a comment related to the item at the Board of Trustees meeting regarding accounts receivable. You spoke of growth, and there's this constant drumbeat of growth and growth, but we know that the growth and the benefits of growth aren't shared equally, and so I want to make sure that you and all of us are doing our best job to ensure that poor and low-income people aren't being left behind. And so the issue of forced disconnections on people who are struggling to make ends meet, who are working long hours for miserable pay, they simply cannot deal with the rising costs of everything. And as we saw recently with the federal revenue bill, the cuts to Medicaid and to SNAP benefits and to a lot of social services is going to continue to put more strain on people who can least afford it. So, CPS really needs to step up and do more to help the people who have the least.
So I think we had a pretty robust conversation. We do more to support our customers than any utility in the country, in my mind. We can't give away electricity for free. So there are limits to our, the minute that you stop disconnects, and I don't want to disconnect anybody. I think the one thing we ask is for customers who find themselves in a financial situation or get behind to be proactive about reaching out to us, and there's assistance for them. But suspending disconnects is, it does, in my opinion, based on 30 years in this business, doesn't help. It puts those customers in a worse situation over the long term, not in a better situation. So the folks that are showing up at our board meetings, they can continue to showing up, but we can't suspend disconnects. We suspend disconnects per PUC regulations when the weather gets above, sustained above 100 degrees heat index or below, 32 or whatever the number is. So I think we're doing as much as we can to ensure customers don't get disconnected, but customers have to do something to help themselves too. And at a minimum, they need to call us. And we will do everything we can for them. But there are limits to what we can do, and a complete moratorium on disconnects is just not something that we can do.
Thank you, Rudy, for saying that. I do want to just remind all of us that I did reach out to Christina to you offer at the board that if anybody wanted to go on the road with our staff, with Deanna, and learn a little bit more about what we do. And I think that's probably the first challenge for us, right, is all those resources that Rudy and that Deanna and the entire CPS team are providing are truly incredible. But without us knowing more about those and being able to be a microphone for those resources, I think that's the first step we can take to continue to provide some solutions.
And I will say, in in the CAC, we did have a point where we would have some of the, the linemen come in to talk about safety and really give a face to some of the people at the front line, right? I loved that. And I think that when we start having conversations about what we want to see moving forward, I'm going to strongly encourage everybody, and I'm going to ask Chris if we can just follow up this conversation about the suggestions with the email and all the instructions on timeline to the CIC members so they can give all of this input, because I don't want this input to get lost. But I will tell you, my brain is usually running on 73 open tabs at one time, always. And so I cannot commit to remembering all of this feedback, but I will when it's written in front of me. So please, please, please send all of these recommendations. And again, we want to make sure we're being accountable to the responsibilities that we have and that are expected of us. That way we can be empowered to also support CPS Energy and also tell CPS Energy when we're seeing things that we need to, that we're hearing from the community as well. And so Rudy, as always, thank you so much for carving time out of your busy schedule to be here.
Thank you for the time, and sorry to interrupt your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rudy.
Okay, I want to just be very quick with getting through the executive notes. So if I can just get the Cliff Note version of the Spark Note version for the other two committees. Tom, I know that Richard's not here today, so on behalf of him, you'll be giving a quick overview of that.
Right. This is the Customer Relations and Communications Subcommittee, and last time we met, Deanna Hardwick was a fantastic speaker for us, gave us an overview of all the accounts receivable and the billings and collections approach, right? And Julianne, I think your point's spot on, and I think there's a lot of measures which are shared in the notes there that are taken. I think one of the big takeaways from our discussion needs to be more data analysis to understand the behavior of people who are either approaching or are at the point of disconnect, to understand how we, CPS, can engage them better such that they don't get shut off. I think there's a whole host of programs that Deanna went through of things to help people recover, people who, if they are proactive, or we can reach out to them in a proactive way that Rudy said, such that they don't get disconnected. So I came away from that meeting with some actions that need to be taken, like further outreach from a marketing perspective, further data analysis to understand customer behavior. But I came away encouraged that CPS is doing the kind of things that need to be done and that there are programs in place. Do we have all the touch points of people who are victim? No, we don't. And I think it's kind of like unemployment. You'll never get to zero unemployment, and you'll probably never get to 100% of the people who need that kind of outreach. But I think we're improving. I think our accounts receivable improved significantly since the beginning of the year, and we expect that to continue. So that's the update from our committee. Thank you, Deanna, for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Tom. And last but certainly not least, Bob.
Yes, thank you. My name is Bob Zapata, and I'm the chair of the Business and Finance Subcommittee. We had a discussion with Vigia, the project manager. This is with respect to the ERP project. ERP is an enterprise resource planning project. Essentially what this is the way the business runs. Right now, CPS has legacy equipment, software, et cetera, not so much equipment, but software and business practices that are over 25 years old. And there's probably around 400 different legacy systems that exist within CPS. The intent of this project is to basically synergize these, simplify the way the work process works by these different committees. What we were shown or at least told about was how the strategic plan, which started in 21, has emerged into where they are today. They're not complete by any means. It's a 9-year project that they're going to roll with, but they've got a good project and a good project team. In my past career, I was part of this same sort of project of migrating from legacy systems to a current ERP, and And I will say I was very impressed with the methodology, the people involved, the interaction, the communication between groups, and the risk management that they've taken to try to reduce either project risk or cost risk in moving forward with this ERP project. As I mentioned, it's a 9-year project. They're nowhere near complete, but one of the things that we as a subcommittee asked is, how is this going to benefit the customer? How will this benefit the employees? Let me just step back a little bit and say, everything that is within an energy company relies on equipment, people, accounts receivables, billing, et cetera. So this is to try to tie all those things together, not only from the equipment side is how do we determine failure before failure occurs, that they're looking at that. Additionally, accounts receivable, how do we know that people are billed correctly? How do we know what their consumption is? How can we help them in their billing? When is the appropriate billing? What is a billing cycle? Those are the kind of things that they're going to be looking at. So from a customer standpoint, we ask that they consider, as they move further along in this project, how they inform the customer what benefits are going to be provided to them. There's no solution to that right now, but that was something that we asked as a subcommittee is how can, with the cost of this project, how can the consumer benefit from this, and what's the communication means to let them know that that's going to occur. But just in closing, I think it's a good project. I think they got a good handle on it. Just on a sub note, it's Oracle's software system, and they have an Accenture. They're the actual company that's helping them roll this out. So it's not just CPS only. They have other teams that are helping them to make sure this is a success. Okay, that's pretty much a conclusion.
Thank you, Bob. All righty, and thank you.
Can I make a comment, please?
Absolutely.
So thank you to Mr. Corser and Mr. Zapata for the summaries, and also to Mr. Onofre. I just would like to point out that the other subcommittee presentations have not been shared with all members of the committee of the CIC. So power and technology is not shared with the other two, and these two are not shared with us. So I've requested on 3 separate occasions that we share the information among the subcommittees. Have not received any response. This is, since March or April, I've been asking to see the reports, the presentations, and to share it among all of us, so that it can enrich the discourse that we have here when we meet. Like Peter said, the executive summaries are fine, but they don't capture everything, and there are certain things that are accidentally on purpose left out. And so just for the benefit of those of us who are on the committee, sometimes we miss the subcommittee meetings, sometimes we miss the full committee meetings. That's just a reality. If we have more knowledge sharing, I think it would benefit us. But again, there seems to be a lid on this information. For example, you were mentioning accounts receivable, Mr. Corser. That would have been great to see. But as of right now, I have not received, none of us have received that complimentary information.
I appreciate your comments, Julian. I know that we did discuss at another meeting trying to put together a site where you guys could go and all find the information. I'm busy populating that site now. As soon as I know that it's in good working condition, so that you're not further frustrated, just know that we've been working on that since probably a month ago, just to make sure that it's populated, it works properly, and then we'll share it with all of you. But we did take your concerns to IT, and we did find a way to make that happen. But thank you again for your comments. Yes, ma'am.
Nope, I just wanted to also just preface, because the subcommittee meetings aren't recorded, I know that I think one of the conversations that we've had is we can put a presentation PowerPoint all day long, but if somebody is a presenter like me, where I use my presentations are usually supporting roles, not the main character in my discussions for anything. So if I also want us to be cognizant of the presentation may say one thing, but if we don't have somebody there to really walk us through it like we do during our subcommittee meetings, it may get lost in translation and transition, right? Which goes back to us having discussions as a larger committee about bringing back the executive sessions so we can have more of those candid conversations as a large committee, while also understanding that there are some things that again, it was mentioned before, we've signed NDAs and confidentiality agreements. So being able to have those conversations more candidly as a larger group. Dr. Gunther, did you have a?
Yes, not necessarily related to what discussion is, but more so in the customer relations in your discussion, Tom. I'm going to talk about a little story that I read this week and then connect the dot to CPS. So I just read a story, I think it was in the Washington Post, about the city of Baltimore has made a tremendous reduction in their crime rate, particularly homicide, by doing things that you wouldn't necessarily think are connected to it. They've opened up after-school programs until the evening. They've opened up schools until the evening, more violence prevention, more investment in food pantries, et cetera. And you've seen the crime rate go down. Now, since I've been a part of CPS, the common thread has been disconnects and the amount of disconnections that are going on and what can we do about those, and it still hasn't gone away. And I would say it's not going to go away unless we can get something done about our poverty rate here in San Antonio, because those two are very much related. So I would say and work to push CPS not only to look at energy generation, which is very important, accounts receivable, which is very important, but also if we could do something about the poverty rate in San Antonio, we could also connect it to a decrease in the disconnect rates that we've been seeing. So I would just advocate that there are ways, I think, CPS can use their voice in terms of customer relations, or just using their voice to advocate for those things that we know are evidence-based that reduce the level of poverty in a city. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cantu. We are going to move on to the next agenda item. Again, I just want to close in saying all feedback, all experiences, all suggestions for bylaws for us to consider, please, we will be giving you guys that email address, and I just highly encourage you guys to please send that in. Next, I know that they have visited us at our last meeting, but there have been some updates to the generation plan. So I am going to introduce Elena Ball, our Chief Strategy Officer, to give us that update.
Is the clicker up here, y'all? Oh, here it is. My bad. Good afternoon. First up, I do want to acknowledge and recognize that we did just provide an update of some of this information to you all at your last committee meeting. So in the interest of honoring a professional courtesy, honoring your time, the material that we've covered, I am going to very, very quickly go over and certainly welcome questions. However, we did want to provide some additional deep dives into some of the headwinds that we're facing, and certainly provide an opportunity for you all to ask questions about some of those headwinds. Additionally, we did want to go ahead and formally let this body know that we are about to embark on our generation plan refresh. And you heard our public speaker, Ms. Belmates, discuss, our 2022 and 2023 process. So we will provide a little bit of information, but we are forming that team, and certainly look to the CIC for your intellect, your guidance, and key involvement. And we will have additional stakeholders involved in that process, but you all are going to certainly be a key sounding board for us as we embark on this work. So just to touch on a few items, and we did cover some of this this information, and our CEO, Rudy Garza, just shared some of the information, but kind of the headlines here are that, we are seeing electric demand accelerating, not only in our region, throughout the state, and quite honestly, throughout the world. Growth, coupled with our retiring legacy generation, is increasing, and that's throughout the market, is increasing the cost and lead time to build generation of all types. And we're seeing energy prices become more volatile as a result. And I will share some specifics on forward prices that we're seeing in the ERCOT market, which is the market that we operate in here in Texas. We've made solid progress, as we talked about in your last session, regarding execution of our generation plan. That was community-led and board-approved, and many of you on this committee were part of the group that embarked on that process. But we still have quite a bit of work to do under that plan, and again, we want to talk about some of the headwinds we're experiencing. Did want to convey to this body that we, on a continual basis, are exploring both owned and purchase power opportunities across all of our technologies, not only for new projects that are being constructed and developed, but also for operating projects in order to meet our power needs in a timely and cost-effective manner. And then as I shared, beginning this fall, we are going to be refreshing our power generation plan. We do have some assumptions that we're in the process of updating. Some of the items that I've shared here are some of those assumptions. And as we mentioned, you all are going to be a key group for input and involvement as we embark on this process. This is just for completeness of the presentation, just a snapshot of the market that we operate in. ERCOT provides power to about 90% of the state of Texas. Currently, ERCOT peaks at around 85,000 megawatts, or 85 gigawatts as we like to describe it. And you can see both the generating capacity and energy use here. This is as of their current energy fact card that's available on ERCOT.com. This is one of the key takeaways. So there's a handful of slides that I'll share, but if I can impress upon you a few pieces of information, this is one of them. As we look forward in ERCOT, and this is not a CPS look, this is actually a set of information that is put out by ERCOT and their experts relative to econometrics modeling and all of the information they have for available forecasting of demand. We see a steep change in our windshield. If you look back both on a peak demand, which is kind of that instantaneous highest electricity consumption basis, as well as a sort of a total energy consumption basis, over the last 22 years, ERCOT has grown by about 20 gigawatts during that period of time. So think about a gigawatt a year. It's really more like 900, but with some ebbs and flows. So that's been pretty predictable. There's been a few market downturns, market upticks. But what we're seeing here in our near-term experience and what we're seeing from a demand perspective is a market change. And so even the most conservative, imbued forecasts are showing a considerable change in the slope of the demand increase in ERCOT. So according to the most recent forecast by ERCOT, they're expecting 70 gigawatts in the next 10 years. So you can think about a 3.5-fold increase in half the time over the next 10 years. And so this is what's happening as a state. We are a microcosm of this. We're not seeing anything different. We certainly have our focus on energy efficiency, demand response, working to work on the demand side of the equation, but the pace of growth that we're seeing in our community and in our region is very emblematic of what ERCOT is forecasting as well. As a result, as ERCOT looks forward and they think about what are the available resources and the projected resources, so this could be, think of all the resource types, from battery storage to solar farms throughout West Texas to wind farms on the Gulf Coast to thermal power plants of all types. We have in the state, we have nuclear, we have natural gas, we have coal, we have some geothermal. All of those resource types, they look at what is the available supply and the expected available supply based on build and announced projects against what our projected demand is going to be. So you can kind of think of this concept of a reserve margin as effectively our supply and demand balance. And this is again the most current report from ERCOT on reserves, and because of this rapid demand growth, ERCOT is forecasting declines and actually inversions of its reserve margin. And again, reminder, they target about a 13.75% reserve margin, which is what we target. We mirror their planning criteria. But we're seeing that get stripped and then go negative over the next 5 years. And so that's both kind of seasonally, but certainly looking at summer and winter when we see the majority of our peaks, we see the same trend in summer and winter. So what this means is market volatility. This shows up in the form of supply chain constraints as well as energy price formation. This is yes, sir.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, but
no, please
just
do.
a quick question on the demand.
Yes, sir.
What's driving that? When I think about CPS's market, I think about residential, I think about small and medium business, and I think about large business, especially data centers. So help us understand that huge demand curve. What's driving it?
That's a wonderful question, and I would say all of the above that you just mentioned are in play in all of the load centers or the major metropolitan areas of Texas. There are some uniquenesses to Texas as well. We have a very business-friendly climate. We are seeing a lot of onshoring of companies moving to Texas due to our business-friendly practices. We're seeing here in San Antonio, my team is very plugged into our economic development partners. So we're seeing businesses here and industrial customers here who are expanding, adding new facilities, and then we have a lot of interest in industrial customers moving, relocating, and investing in our community. Data centers get a lot of the air in the room because they are so new and they are, going to be a considerable increase. But we're seeing large industries of all types come into play. I would also note another key area in Texas that drives the demand in the state. Out in West Texas, there is a tremendous amount of growth going on around the Permian Basin, and that's over 40 gigawatts of load out there. And I'm going to look to my ERCOT friends, make sure I'm being honest. I think it's 46, but subject to check. But growth in general across the state, and certainly the artificial intelligence, data centers, machine learning are helping drive that steepness of the curve, and they're bringing a lot of energy consumption, but it's across the board.
And does San Antonio market that CPS serves look the same in terms of demand as well as the reserve margins?
Yes, sir, we do. We look very similar from the demand perspective. I will give huge credit to this body and many of the folks who served on our generation planning team. With our foresight, understanding that growth was coming, we've taken some bold steps in expanding solar, expanding our storage. We've had some wind additions. We've got more to come there. And we've also onboarded existing operating gas facilities. All of those things have helped our reserve margin be longer than the state. So we're ahead of the curve from that perspective. But as we look out over this period of time, 2029 becomes tight for us again. And it's just the growth. I would also characterize that in our region, there are specific types of industries that come to our region, and it's, we don't have, for example, a lot of chemical manufacturers or refineries like you see on the Gulf Coast. We don't see oil and gas development like you do in West Texas, but we do see a lot of really helpful job creative industries coming for manufacturing. As you all know, we have automotive manufacturing. We have industries of all kinds of types, high tech, et cetera, that are interested in coming to this region and are looking to spend billions in our community to expand and grow. So the complexion of the makeup of businesses looks a little different from the state, but the arc of the demand is very similar. I know we've shared with the board, I'm not sure how very specifically we've shared with this body, but specific to large load, which includes, for us, we look at anything that's over 40 megawatts. The state is now looking at anything over 75 megawatts, but kind of all the people, all the things that I just talked about. Right now, our peak load is just below 6,000 megawatts. We have almost 2,000 megawatts of large load under some form of contract to move into our system. Behind that, of very significant interest, you can think of people who have bought land, people who are working to find ways to interconnect and come to market quickly. Another 6,000 megawatts. And then we have in total, if you were to add it all up, almost 17,000 megawatts in total of interest in our region against a current load of 6,000. And so I know that's going to generate a lot of questions, but I want to share what we know with you all so you see what we're challenged with. Yes, ma'am.
So just to help me understand, I know that Texas does and San Antonio business-friendly practices to encourage businesses to come, which we are seeing, and as you talked about with the load. So just help me understand, are those packages that are used to incentivize them to move to San Antonio, Texas, et cetera, does that also include some discounts on their utility rates for a certain amount of years, 1 year, 2 year discount? And does that happen? Is that included in those business-friendly practices?
Yeah, and I probably should caveat my comments about our business-friendly environment in Texas. We're very fortunate that we don't pay a state income tax. Specific to large companies moving to our area, we control our routing and siting of transmission within our state. And that sounds pretty boring. I talk about this at parties and people think I'm a nerd. They don't talk to me, but I'm like, this is a huge stimulus for our state. But it is, because throughout the United States, routing and siting is controlled by a federal entity called FERC, and they're very slow, and their logjam is real. So for that, as well as a number of other reasons, we're just can-do people in Texas too. We just find a way to figure out how to help people be successful, and all of those reasons are really why we are attractive to businesses, and we do have a lot of energy, right? So we see a lot of folks from Europe who want to move their facilities here. Specific to economic development, I want to be very clear. When I talk about these load growths, we're not creating incentive packages at CPS Energy to try to bring these folks here. They want to move here because of reliable, affordable energy and all the characteristics of our region. And so we're working to try to find ways to service and help them grow their businesses. So, by no means are we creating subsidies on our energy costs to try to attract these folks. In fact, we are so blessed, we're overflowing with demand, trying to figure out how to help folks move to the area.
I think what you said is that a subsidy is not included.
We do not subsidize.
CPS does not subsidize any of that. Okay.
And I think, can I add to that? I think that's really important to note because Greater SATX is competing with other EDCs, right? Georgia, as an example, will provide a really sturdy package for incentivizing the power. We do not. But when we talk about the early conversations of helping create jobs, our number one goal, right, is reliable, affordable energy, so we attract those companies so that we can provide better jobs. So I think what we're doing is a really good job at recruiting those companies, because we need those manufacturing companies to provide additional jobs for our community.
Thank you all for the questions. So the two slides I just shared, just again to impress upon you what we're facing, we're seeing a pretty stable, consistent demand growth pattern for 22 years. We're seeing a market increase and acceleration of demand as a state, and quite honestly, if you look across the United States, we see very similar electric consumption patterns across the United States. We may be a bit more pronounced in Texas because of our speed to be able to interconnect, but this is an industry and a worldwide challenge. And as a result, as you look at where ERCOT is currently positioned with available and planned resources, we are going to see tightening reserve margins, effectively supply and demand becoming very close. And projections are showing that we're going to be in a period in a few years where there is a desire for more demand that can't be met by planned supply. So you all know, you guys are probably, I'm just a simple engineer, a chemical engineer, I'm not an economist, but when supply and demand gets tight, prices lift. Supply chains rush to that price, and those create headwinds for development. I am an engineer, so if I don't show a graph that's unintelligible, they take my degree back. So we're required to do that once a presentation. I'm just teasing. This is intelligible, but it is definitely a nerdy graph. But this is a graph, and I'll describe it so you can kind of follow the lines. this is a graph that shows year over year the price trends, the forward price trends. So that's not what's happening right now in ERCOT. That's if today you wanted to say, I want to go buy 500 megawatts in the future. How much am I going to pay for that energy? And a lot of the trading in energy markets happens in the future. A lot of people don't ride on the day because of things like Uri, where prices can blow out. So a lot of people, and we are part of that, we plan and procure energy in forward markets. So this is a forward market that looks at something called ATC. It's just around the clock. Think of this as the cost of energy around the clock for an entire year. Along the bottom, there's a delivery date, and it starts in 25 and goes out to 30. And the different lines, there's 3 different lines here. The price, the other index here is basically the price of energy in dollars per megawatt hour. So you can think about if today I was going to go buy a year of energy, depending on the month, what is that price going to be? That's what that represents. Now, the 3 different lines speak to different time periods. So the dark blue line here, which is that lower line, that was what it looked like in June of 2023. So you can think about this as, this is what energy and the forward energy prices looked like 2 years ago, and that kind of is the forward strip. The next sort of burgundy color was January of 24. So 6 months later, a year and a half ago, they had lifted. And then this is very recent. We haven't pulled it for today, but in June of this year, you can see that light blue. And effectively, you don't need to study all these numbers, but the takeaway here is that over the last 2 years, because of these dynamics and some other factors, forward market price signals have increased to 30 to 50% depending on the month of the year and time of the year, just over the last 2 years. And supply constraints that we are forecasting, that we're seeing out our front window, we expect to lead to additional price increases in the coming years, and also price volatility. Periods with, where certain resources are available or not during periods of demand can lead to not only sort of this around the clock, just what forward prices are calling for energy, but that intraday and inside a day volatility. I won't go into this right one because it's super nerdy, but it's a different way to view the same information, which deals with a thermal cost versus a monetary cost.
But Elena, that price increase, the forward price increase curve reflects the demand approaching supply. Is that the driver?
It actually, that is a key driver, but it pulls in all factors that could drive price formation, but demand is a huge part of it.
Yeah, but I want to understand if the cost to provide that power is forecasted to increase, driving that curve or not.
Yeah, so you're gonna force me to move over to the right graph. Okay, this is good. All right, you guys are gonna nerd out with me today. So there is a construct called a heat rate in the market, and effectively it is that. It's what are the efficiency levels of the technologies that are providing energy, and when supply and demand get tight, and the way ERCOT dispatches resources from the lowest cost, most efficient units on a variable basis to the highest cost. So as conditions get higher, that supply curve gets up to those more or less efficient units, more costly units. So you absolutely do see the system-wide price go up. And that's a big driver, but even as you get up into those levels, the price will move even beyond that based on projected shortfalls. And so this MMBTU per megawatt hour, which I know Melissa's in the room and Deanna, they're super excited that we used a graph that had those, but it's effectively the amount of heat necessary to produce a unit of electrical energy. You can see it's lifting as well, and it's exactly the point that you're raising, which is in periods of tighter demand, less efficient machines are going to be called on more, and it's going to overall increase the cost. I'm available for bar mitzvahs and birthday parties as well. We showed this slide last time, and again, to honor your time, I feel like some of this is very redundant, and I don't want to do that, but I do want to let you know that we're going to pull on a couple of headwinds that we want to impress upon you and why we are looking at all these options around, resources that we might build, resources that we might buy, whether that's wind or solar or other things, gas. And two that we want to pull on here, we've talked quite a bit about load growth. You've heard about our transmission constraints, which are tied to the earlier discussion around Bronig and our generators that are coming to our community and the work that we have to address those. But two that we've spent a little bit of time on, and Kathy and our regulatory team are going to go into the second one in much more detail. But I wanted to touch on supply chain constraints we're seeing, as well as regulatory uncertainty. And there's a lot of others, but the first one I do want to touch on that we're seeing in real time is the cost to build new generation. And it's of all types, but with regard to the demand that we're seeing and the energy that is needed to produce, all resources are being challenged, right? We're seeing increased costs, increased lead times. But I did want to show this infographic. Back in 2022, when we were conducting our generation plan update or creation, and there's several sources on here, and this, I will make sure this gets circulated to everyone, but there's several external sources here to support these prices. And you'll see some of the leading utilities in the world and in the United States with their quotes about what they're seeing. But to build new gas-fired generation in 2022 was about just under $1,300 a kilowatt hour. Now, I do want to give a reference point. So, we were fortunate to get in and buy the Corpus Christi and Laredo plants at a cost much lower than this, which is how we justified buying those plants instead of building them, because we got the capacity at a much lower cost. In 2023, that cost of new construction moved up to over $1,400. In 2024, we're seeing over $1,700. And here in 2025, because of the rush to fill this demand, we're seeing we're seeing not being able to get equipment for several years. Some cases 5 to 7 years of new build as far as supply chain timelines, and we're seeing the cost to build in excess of $2,200. Recent project announcements have been closer to $2,500. So the cost and timelines for new construction, in particular of gas resources, have doubled in 2.5 years. So as we think about our generation plan in all resources, and I will touch on some regulatory matters, that's really kind of reaffirming our focus on, you may see us in the future coming forward and saying, look, there's an existing wind farm that's being repowered. We think it's more economic to add capacity or invest in that wind farm versus a brand new wind farm, still getting all of that energy from our portfolio. You've seen what we've done with Corpus Christi and Laredo, and that's been very beneficial to our portfolio. But we're going to keep all of these available tools at our disposal because of this phenomena. And it all ties back, again, 3 graphs. If you can think about the upcoming demand, the reserve margin, and this is a key headwind, and there are many others, those are all very much salient and at top of mind for us.
I have a question,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
also related maybe to greater SATX. Is there a point with all this growth that CPS Energy has to say, stop, because the demand is too great and we're not going to have the generation? I mean, just in my work, as everybody else's work, you keep getting asked to do more and more. I have to say, at some point, no, if I want to keep my sanity. Is there a point, or have we reached that point, or will we ever reach that point where we say, hey, we can't go further without compromising the customers we already have?
Yeah, so it's a really, really interesting question. We are a regulated business, so we're quite a bit of a different animal compared to a business that is not regulated. And why I say that is, on our retail side of our business, when customers come and ask to interconnect, we can't say no from a discrimination standpoint. So we are not in a position where we can say, we aren't going to serve you. We look at our electric reliability And if there are reliability constraints that interconnecting a customer causes, we build plans to address those reliability matters. And that's what a lot of the transmission investment is driving toward. Because we do have customers who would love to be here now electrified. We just have investments that we need to make in order to make that to effectuate that. We don't have to invest in generation. That's a different question that I think you're asking. Like, do we have to invest in generation? We invest in generation in order to ensure that our customers' bills are protected and are low. And so as we grow, we do have to balance all of these decisions with our financial wherewithal, but most importantly, our customer bills, right? So, I mean, we could in theory, today say we're not going to have generation. We're going to just build to load. We create a scenario under which all of those risks and that market price formation becomes real time versus having these hedges that provide physical hedges or physical protections that provide price certainty. I talk about a lot of numbers and concepts, but just to kind of give a frame of reference of the wholesale market volatility. Most days our energy prices are $20, $30, ERCOT most of the time is provided, maybe $40. Some days, if there's a lot of renewables on the system, we can be sub $10. So, I mean, prices are very affordable. We do have a very elastic market, so when things get tight, as everything out the window is showing us they're going to be, ERCOT can increase its price to something called a system-wide offer cap of up to $5,000. So you can think about it as your own. I think about my vehicle. If I'm driving around and I have a fill up, it could be $20 or $30, but it could be $5,000, and that changes every 15 minutes. The value of that $5,000 fill up for us at peak at 5,800 is $29.1 million an hour. Okay, for context, that's, Corey, keep me honest, I think that's a 1.5% annual rate increase in an hour. And so, not to be scary, I'm just trying to explain the bounds of the risk management that we operate in and why we invest in as efficient and low-cost generation as we possibly can. So it's probably way more information than you guys wanted, but I did want to share that.
So the timelines, right? Is that really a supply chain issue, or is that ability to build these sophisticated power plants, or capacity to build?
It's both.
Both?
It's both. It's certainly, supply chain is creating the challenge because there is so much demand to build plants, and we're contemplating building plants, right? We've got activities underway right now for peakers here in our area. And so the lines to get into the manufacturers are longer. The cost to get your equipment is higher. But also manufacturers, all of our supply base, they operated with all of us right here, right? So they're seeing.
But they see that same curve in the future, right? So
they do.
Are they responding to that?
They are, but building a plant to build power plants takes quite a bit of time.
Understood.
And so, but you'll see it, you're seeing announcements by all sorts of technologies where there's rapid expansions, but it's going to take a decade or more for folks to catch up. But absolutely, it is supply chain, and it's also just the inherent capacity of the manufacturers to be able to keep up with this growth. It's very rare to see this kind of increase in demand in any industry. It can happen, but this is pretty unprecedented. It's a great question.
Can I just make a comment? There is an ERCOT app, and if you don't have it, I recommend downloading it. But you can kind of track this in lifetime, day by day, hour by hour. So just more insights into that.
Thank you for that. It is.
So I have a quick question. On the supply chain issue, what % of that material that we're seeking is domestically produced versus non-domestically produced and might be impacted by tariffs or some of the other craziness going on in the market, the international market?
Yeah, that's a really, really extremely astute question. It depends on the nature of what you're buying, right? I would say that it is a combination of domestic and international. Some of the America First policies that have been in play for the last couple of years have brought some onshoring back, but it is absolutely a mix. And so, we've had, and I wanted to touch on this, some of the changes that have been happening at the federal level, and some very, very recently, are things that we're watching closely, right? The ability to, many of our renewable projects have enjoyed, and we, as a result, our customers have enjoyed low-cost renewable projects because of federal tax incentives and some of the recent announcements around the IRA change, as well as expectations around domestic or foreign manufacturing have caused some concern. Some of those, thankfully, have been adjusted so that, we can keep costs, we think, somewhat more competitive. But the answer is, it's not I can't tell you they're all domestic or they're all international. It is absolutely a mixed bag. We have a lot of domestic production of core electrical equipment here in the United States, but we have a lot of some of our specialized equipment that are international. And then, obviously a lot of the renewable, especially batteries, solar, we have a lot of international content of those projects. Yes, sir.
Thanks for the presentation so far, Elena. But on the reevaluation of the generation plan,
Yes, sir.
and I know when we did the initial and we factored in the STEP program,
Yes, sir.
and I understand that report's coming out
It is.
here soon. And of course, when we've talked about it being the fifth fuel, and when you look at that demand growth, I mean, it's incredible to try to challenge that. But the benefit to the STEP program and really investing more in that, because the disadvantaged and the energy efficiency that comes with it, and just being able to show the value back into that demand response, I think is important.
Yes,
so
sir.
I'm assuming that you'll be factoring it into the gen plan as we did initially. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. It absolutely will be. We can't guarantee future, actions by future council members, et cetera, on the STEP program or our board, but we absolutely are factoring in continued investment in energy and efficiency and demand reductions and demand response under our STEP program. And quite honestly, some of our real scarce periods with these large loads have been helpful. I don't want to take Kathy's thunder or David's, but they're going to talk to you about some of the legislative matters that happened in this last session. And one in particular was a Senate bill that really highlighted some needs to island some of these large loads off the grid, which will be also helpful. But it won't solve all the problems, but it's certainly a huge benefit. And we, as energy prices lift, energy efficiency and demand response become more and more valuable, right? So really, really good point. I don't want to take up, there's so much good content they've got. I don't want to take up any more time, but I did want to touch on a couple of other regulatory matters. But if you have other questions, okay, just real quick. So I did touch on renewable, and y'all, I know, are very active from a civic perspective, probably followed a lot of the things that happened at the federal government. With the tax incentives, thankfully, there were, for a little bit of time, there were some excise, or I don't know if I got it right, but some taxes that were being proposed on renewable projects in particular relative to content. And I'm very thankful that some of the senators and representatives were able to unwind those pieces, because that was really going to be harmful, I feared, for renewable resources. But there certainly have been changes relative to rolling off ITCs and PTCs in the next few years. Nuclear, geothermal, and hydrogen seem to have made it through, as well as storage, as far as no significant negative impact with regard to some of the recent federal actions. One thing I'd highlight, and we've talked to our board briefly about, very briefly, there have been some recent actions that the federal administration has taken to require fossil fuel plants, in particular dispatchable resources, to continue to operate beyond their announced retirements, kind of similar to what happened with Browning with us here in ERCOT. So that is still at play, and we are seeing the federal administration take more of those actions, which haven't happened traditionally in the past. The three actions that have taken place so far have been in Puerto Rico. There were 30 generators down there that the federal government deemed necessary for bulk electric reliability of the island. one in MISO, which I think was a consumer's resource, and then another in PJM, which is a constellation resource. And so we're just monitoring that and aware of those. And then here in the state, this is, again, super nerdy, but there are some things that we're monitoring. ERCOT did update their effective load carrying capacity assumptions around resources. Why this is important is it's all about how ERCOT's planning for peak and how different resources perform during that peak. And there are certain resources that have seen a reduction in their ELCC contribution. In particular, wind has seen a reduction, and solar stayed the same. Some of the batteries, some were lower and some were higher. So those all will be at play as we update the gen plan to say how are resources ultimately going to help contribute to reliability and price protection during peak events. Market design continues, and then there's also recently, June 6th, the PUCT put out a notice around proposed rulemaking around firming requirements. This would essentially be prospectively, I think it was January 1, 2027, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but resources that are intermittent in nature, kind of how would they need to bring along firming resources? And that is all TBD. Lots of discussions are going to go on, but that's going to be something that we're going to be watching, as well as a litany of other matters. So I'd hoped to be as quick as possible, but those are the key updates. We covered all of these things. I don't want to continue to toot our horn, but we are continuing to try to drive that gen plan and optimize it, find resources that are the lowest cost and can help us achieve what we're trying to achieve, recognizing all these headwinds. And again, we're going to continue to add new generation because of that demand growth. We are going to look at our financials and make sure that we're protecting customers. It's helpful to customers' bills for the long term. And we'll be looking at building, buying, contracting, wind, solar, storage, and natural gas. Those are predominantly the areas that we still have to fill in the gen plan. And then we are about to embark on the generation plan refresh. We're in the process of updating 2022 assumptions and developments, and really look forward to working with this body and others to seek your input and involvement, and make sure that as this load growth is coming, that we're making sure that we're positioning the utility to protect our customers and ensure the viability of our community. That's all I have.
Elaine, fantastic presentation. Thank you. Although this characterizes the problem in front of us, it doesn't present the plan, which is coming in fall. Got it. But I'm interested in your perspective on a couple things. One is the time frame, right? We say 2027 update, right? That's tomorrow.
It is.
With regard to investment horizon, right? I think we've got to think about 10 years, right? And so I'm interested in your perspective about what it is our headwinds are for the next 10 years. And then I'm interested in the headwind with respect to image. In other words, to turn that around, what do you want San Antonio market, CPS's customers to know about the headwinds that we face, right? Because I think, coming from the customer engagement communications, right, very interested in the dipstick in that tank, whether it's coming out full or not, right, in terms of what that opinion is. So interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, the first question I feel a little bit more informed to be able to answer. As we look to our gen plan update, we focused our generation plan update in 2022 for out to 2050, right? We're going to continue to look that far, but when we looked at near-term actions, we were really looking at what do we need to get accomplished between that time and 2030. And we've got a pretty solid plan. Like I mentioned, the demand growth is calling into question some of our reserve margins based on initial looks at our demand forecast in that 2028, 2029 period. So we may have some things, we've got some challenges in that period, but that's just because of all this, right, this new spike. For the gen plan refresh, we're going to continue to look out to 2050, but we are going to focus the effort really on what does our work look like between now and 2040, because that is, to your point, the next 15 years is because of the timelines to build, buy, construct, et cetera. We need to be making our path now, charting it, and that is going to be the important work of this body and this plan. And we aren't, just so y'all know, the gen plan refresh, we're embarking on it this fall, but we do want to have this wrapped up in the next several months. So we aren't going to continue it for years. We want to get smart people, inclusive input, and get this thing knocked out. And we have a great plan now. It really isn't like, oh, our gen plan isn't in great shape. It is. It's just that some of the assumptions have changed. We've got more demand coming, right? Some of our costs of resources are coming up. So do we need to make different decisions? And so just FYI. On the image to the community, so full disclosure, y'all already figured out I'm the least fun person at a party, and I'm an engineer, so I have a face for radio, and so I have no business talking about the image of this company, but I will lean maybe on, I can't see around the pillar, is Melissa or Deanna over there, or they stepped out? I'll say, like, as we think, I'll do my best, again, engineer talking communications, but, you know, look, at the end of the day, we want to be what this community needs, right? And so at the end of the day, we're owned by the community. We're your friends and neighbors. We're served by this organization, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right things that we've set forth in our vision, which is we want to make sure we're providing a reliable energy at an affordable cost, and that we're moving to cleaner sources of energy. And we're doing that in a way that lifts our community up, right? It does not. I was out in the field this morning too. I did a Clark Kent, look kind of presentable to you guys. But I mean, the neighborhoods we were in, they're people just living in really just difficult situations. And so for us, that affordability piece and making sure that we're creating conditions to build economic lift and keep bills low is so important because we know how many folks are struggling. So I don't know how pithy that is or if it's good on the dipstick, but those are things that we talk about every meeting here in this organization. So I've overstayed my welcome.
Comment briefly. I know we're over time. Thank you for the presentation, and I mean, I'd definitely like to ask you questions like outside of the meeting.
Absolutely.
Regarding the generation plan. You know, there's a lot to unpack, and there's, you know, we have a lot of questions, and there are a lot of things, you know, that are unanswered in what you presented. But I will say that, you know, this constant drumbeat of growth, as I, you know, mentioned earlier, there are physical limitations, and I mean physics. And so we are already straining the capacity of our systems, both man-made systems and natural systems. Nothing grows unbounded, not anything man-made or natural. And so this logic of exponential growth in a, you know, industry that is already enormous, you know, the Texas grid is, I mean, it's hugely complex, and, you know, it's the logic of a cancer. So, you know, a bacterial colony growing in a petri dish will continue to grow until it eats all the food and then they all die. I would hope that the human species is smarter than that. And so, you know, I know that ERCOT has its projections, and, you know, that is something that they have to plan for. I don't think that it's feasible or realistic to say that we can meet all of that projected demand. I mean, honestly, looking at that graph, it's like a recipe for rolling blackouts. In addition to the fact that, you know, we already have constraints, you know, I don't know if ERCOT's projections plan for, you know, the climate crisis, which increases demand for energy, especially in hot climates. Thermoelectric generation requires a lot of water. Do we have enough water? No, we don't, because we're already in extreme drought, you know. So there's so many things that, like I said, that we need to unpack. And, you know, you mentioned a little bit about the regulatory and supply chain headwinds. You know, the administration is putting tariffs on steel, aluminum, and copper. We need all of those things to build generation, right, and transmission, right? So there, like I said, I'm happy to discuss with you more. I just wanted to get those comments out. So thanks again, and I'll give the floor to
Elena, thank you so much for the
I'm sorry, one quick question. Going back to the volatility of the markets currently, and even more so moving forward, I'm guessing when it comes to, I hate to call it windfalls revenues, but when the new units that have been purchased are called in by ERCOT, and there are opportunities on the spot market to make money. As I understand it right now, those excess funds go straight back into the general fund for CPS. Has there been any discussion of, depending on how large those windfalls are, trying to come up with certain priorities for some of those, whether that's for new generation or for help with energy efficiency and STEP, or for helping people in arrears, or for that matter, working with the library branches and SA, ISD and other school systems to promote resiliency at some of the public facilities in case we do have a terrible blackout because of ERCOT in July or August?
Yeah, it's a really great question about the wholesale revenues that we have as a utility, and really great observation. So when we acquired the units for the Corpus Christi and Laredo assets, those were to replace peaking units as well as planned combined cycle units. So we weren't really adding, we were replacing with existing assets, right? So just wanted to highlight that. But we are long right now as we have conventional units that are getting near their end of life. Ultimately, all those resources will become in service to retail. Right now, we have executed both some bilateral, kind of longer, a little bit mid and long-term deals like the prices we talked about here, and then we do have some real-time revenues that are created. I do want to state that we don't have a general fund, and our wholesale revenues, they do flow back to the utility, but by and large, our wholesale revenues are, we generate the revenues to offset the fuel costs for customers. So when we earn money on our resources, ultimately the costs that we incur to buy power and fuel, it offsets those costs. We do have a flow of funds that enables a return to our city, and so as we see revenues that are in excess of, of our projections or just revenue in general, a portion of those do go back to the city, which the city has the discretion to fund some of the programs that you're describing relative to the community. But I did want to highlight that, and now I'm stepping into the very dangerous role of the CFO who's over there. So feel free to correct me, Corey, if I'm making any misstatements there too. Okay.
I think the only thing I'd add is we have forecasted that wholesale revenue already in today's forecast. And I wouldn't call it excess. Don't call it excess. And Elaine did a fantastic job. So I also did not change from the field. So she did. I stayed in my outfit. Yeah, those are planned. So the past couple of years have kind of been surprised, and it's just been reinvested, and it offsets cost. That's the main message I think you should take from it. And because of the length we are aware of, that is in our forecast now, and will offset those future costs. So that's the way to think about it. Hopefully that's helpful, but Elaine did a great job answering that.
I'm gonna, because we are over time, Elena, thank you so much for the presentation. I will say I am married to an engineer, and there is a reason why I got voluntold into the position of being the spokesperson for my family. So I get it. You did a phenomenal job. Thank you so much. I know that this will be coming back to us, I think again, correct? At least one more time. And so this, because of the gravity of this plan and the responsibility and task of us wanting, of them, the request from us to be providing input into this, I will make the recommendation that we either have this as the only agenda item so we can really prioritize this and give us, because I really did appreciate the input that was given during this conversation, and I want us to continue to be respectful of that input that we give and being able to get responses to that help us understand how to make better perspectives, ideas, or thank you, recommendations. Words are hard today, guys. But thank you guys so much. I know that we are over time. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know that we had the ledge item on the agenda. If we want to, we can continue to have that conversation today if you guys would like. But because we are over time, I am not going to force you guys to have to stay any longer than need be. Congratulations to our ledge team that goes up there. You guys made it through another ledge season. That is phenomenal. And then thank you guys so much for your patience in getting through the conversation. We saved the best for last, didn't we? So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to officially adjourn. The meeting for the sake of the CIC, but we are going to go on with the conversation, and Carrie Mayer, you're going to go ahead and lead us into a ledge update. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that'll continue to roll for record purposes, but as just a matter of just for also the record to just state that it is adjourned. We are now on happy hour time at this point.
We'll continue this. It's still video streaming, and then in the next 48 hours, we'll post it to the website. So if you're not able to stay, thank you for your time today. This is super interesting. If you can stay, I would. Yes, ma'am. One more thing.
You guys are officially
Adjourned.
So no actual committee business will be had. This will be just information.
All right, well, I will make this as quick as I possibly can and as exciting as I possibly can, but appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Carrie Meyer, Director of Federal and State Relations. I believe y'all heard from Zanir Ali, our manager, leading up to the session. So I'm gonna hit the highest points in the interest of time, but I'm happy to stop along the way if there are questions or if we want to dive into any specific bills. But what we're going to discuss, or what I have in my presentation, is the key takeaways for CPS Energy. We're then going to look at, you all may recall, we have our public policy agenda that is separated into 4 pillars. I'll hit a couple of bills that passed within each pillar. And then we'll talk about how we worked with others internally and externally to succeed this session, and then what happens next. You know, I wish when they adjourned and went home that we got to go home, but never happens. Again, this presentation will cover the successes that we had, but happy to talk on any other things as we get through. This is nerdy in a different way. This was my 10th regular session, so it's a strange addiction. But the biggest takeaways that we have is that we had a successful session at CPS Energy, advocating for our public policy agenda. There were over 9,000 bills and resolutions that were filed by members. It was a new record this time around, and our team looked at and identified over 500 of those that we determined needed to be tracked, analyzed, and engaged in some way. And then roughly there's, I think, about 70 that we tracked that ended up passing. We saw that our legislators were primarily focused on types of generation resources, as well as how to integrate new technologies and large loads. I know Elena mentioned Senate Bill 6 a minute ago. And a lot of these are going to require agency rulemakings. So where we engaged in the legislative process, we're now going to keep that going into the regulatory process at the various state agencies. As a refresher, these are our 4 pillars, and so we'll just keep going through. So our customer affordability and impacts pillar is really the lens through which we look at every bill. Is any type of bill that gets introduced that could impact us, we look at it in terms of what is the intended benefit versus what is the anticipated cost to our customers at the end of the day. And that is how we look at and balance everything. But on this pillar, more to that, it's also at looking at the ways in which we can assist our customers and how we can mitigate any potential negative impacts of legislation filed. So a couple of things that we have here is the general appropriations bill for the next biennium does include $5 billion to fully fund the Texas Energy Fund, which you all may recall from 2 years ago, is creating a loan and grant program for the building of new dispatchable generation. We also saw, and we'll talk a little bit about this more on another slide, but the legislature passed HB 14 to show the state support for advanced nuclear, and that includes $350 million for a grant program. And then a couple of other ones I really want to highlight is, you know, the work that was done, the news reports that we saw last year here in the San Antonio area related to customers experiencing issues with residential solar installers. We saw a couple of bills pass here. So we have our Residential Solar Retailer Regulatory Act, which requires those who wish to provide residential solar to be certified in order to, an occupational registration to be able to operate. And then SB 1697 is going to task the PUC with creating a solar energy guide for consumers. Basically, so that if you're an individual and you're thinking you want to install solar at your home, this guide is going to help you navigate that, determine questions to ask, things to look out for, to really make sure you feel prepared and equipped to engage in that possible interaction. And as MOUs and any other utilities will also be part of that in terms of making sure our customers are aware that this guide is out there and available. Going to the MOU governance, every session, oh, yes, sir.
On that last slide, on that, I think it's SB1, and that it approached $5 billion to the Texas Energy Fund.
Yes, sir.
Did the criteria stay the same, that it has to be new construction of plants? And if it is, which I'm assuming it is there any way to change that now that it's in the bill? There's no way to modify it between here and, just because of the demand for trying to maintain what we currently have, and opportunity for CPS to pull funds into the repair of especially if the whole grid needs those resources. So that's my question. I've asked it before, but now that it's actually been passed, wanted to follow up.
So there were no changes to the criteria of the program. There was a bill that passed just to clarify some things with the original intent of the fund, but nothing about that changed. And if there were to be any changes to that, that would have to go back through the legislature. So it's possible, depending on how they go through the current application cycle and the current work the PUC is doing, but because those elements of the fund are outlined in statute, they'd have to go back to the legislature to make changes. And I'll phone my friend over here, David Key. Did I miss anything? No? All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
So on the MOU governance topic, that is always one of our top priorities every session, because we do see legislation filed that would seek to negatively alter the MOU governance model and certain aspects of it, whether it's in a big way or a small way. We saw some filed this session as well, but they didn't really get much attention. Nothing really happened with those. And actually on the opposite end of the spectrum, we did see a couple of bills that passed that, while they were intended to address a perceived hindrance at local levels of those individuals wanting to install solar or other backup energy systems, we were successful in getting language into those bills to maintain the authority that municipally owned utilities have over our systems and our processes and our infrastructure. So while these bills will allow, a third-party inspection of energy backup systems or prevent a local government from hindering a person's ability to install backup energy at their home, it still preserves our ability as the utility to make sure the infrastructure is sound, that our specs and processes are preserved. I will hit this one as best I can, but we've talked a little bit about Senate Bill 6. So this is under the reliability and resiliency bucket, and where this really focuses in on is the reliability and resiliency of both our generation and our transmission system. What we saw this session is House Bill 14, I mentioned a second ago. That's the state's show of support for advanced nuclear. So we're actually going to see an office stood up in the governor's office for advanced nuclear, as well as a reimbursable grant program to the tune of $350 million. You all may recall the governor created an advanced nuclear working group over the interim. We were fortunate to have a member of our team on there, and this is the result of that work, of the state saying we want to do what we can to support the proliferation of advanced nuclear. And then we also had Senate Bill 6, as Elena mentioned. This is this piece of legislation has set up the framework that David and his team, and we'll talk about that in a minute, will work through at the PUC and ERCOT levels for how system-wide large loads will be integrated into ERCOT in a way that balances business planning with ensuring that costs are shared appropriately, and that this is done in an organized transparent manner. These last three I'll take together because they all are the result of the Panhandle wildfires, and there was work in the interim done to investigate at a legislative level what happened and what could be done by the legislature going forward. So we have three bills here that touch on different elements that were found during those wildfires. So we'll see that the PUC will be charged with creating pole inspection standards for transmission and distribution poles. And then you will also see that distribution poles will now have to, utilities will now have to provide inspection mitigation plans to the Public Utility Commission. And then lastly, utilities who are in wildfire risk areas will have to file wildfire mitigation plans with the legislature. So these three bills were the legislature's way of looking at how do we reinforce the transmission system, what's currently out there, how do we protect what's out there, and then with Senate Bill 6, it was how do we look at the future of the transmission system and the new loads that are coming on board. And then lastly, safety and security. This is actually a new pillar that we added this time around, and it is to focus us not only on the physical security of our assets and our employees, but also cyber security as well. A couple of ones I'll highlight. We have the Texas Grid Security Commission is going to be a newly created commission. It's going to be advisory in nature. They won't have any regulatory oversight or enforcement authority, but they will be charged with assessing grid security issues and making recommendations to the Public Utility Commission and the legislature on things that could be looked at to further enhance the security of the electric grid. And some of those things they'll be looking at are hazards, responding to natural disasters, cyber attacks, and physical sabotage. And then I really want to highlight Senate Bill 482. You all may recall during Hurricane Beryl recovery efforts, utility workers that were helping with mutual aid efforts faced some harassment, potential attacks, a very, very difficult situation down in that area. And the legislature passed Senate Bill 482, which we supported. And what that does is that increases from a misdemeanor charge to a third-degree felony if you assault a utility worker doing their work, and increases it further to a second-degree felony if you assault a utility worker working in an evacuated zone or a disaster recovery zone. And then there's also an increased penalty for harassment of a utility worker while they're undertaking their responsibilities. And so this applies to electric and gas utility workers, so it covers both sides of our business and really any kind of utility worker that's out there working in the public realm. Yes.
Does it also apply to like contracted workers as well? So like let's say there was like a secondary like a subcontractor, would that also apply to them as well?
I can follow up with you on that to see exactly how utility worker was defined.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, we can do that. And there's, other things happened in this arena. Again, these are just the highlights, but then so that was the what, yes, sir.
Carrie, I've got a question before you get off those legislative slides.
Uh-huh.
I got to say, first of all, this is yeoman's work to have to go through those 5,000 bills. It was unbelievable. And in fact, having to go through that Texas legislature website, I mean, Google search doesn't work through that. I've been kind of frustrated through some of that too, but nonetheless, appreciate that effort. There was some on there that I didn't see that I kind of followed.
Sure.
House Bill 3356, some of these related to construction.
Okay.
And then setbacks, and then like the Senate 3356 was the backup power requirement. That was a big deal because that was going to add costs to all these utilities, right? That was 3356. Then 819 was a setback requirements, the Senate Bill 819, and then 388 was a renewable energy. They were trying to slow the development of renewable energy within the state.
Mm-hmm.
Any idea? I don't know what happened to those. I don't know where those ended up.
Sure, I need to specifically look up 3356, but the other two you mentioned, those did not pass.
Okay.
Those two, as well as another one, and that thanks for bringing that up, because there was a bucket of bills that were filed that would have negatively impacted renewables. Those were a few of them. There would have been, a requirement that 50% of your annual new build is dispatchable.
Correct.
Or, the firming requirements, additional permitting requirements. And none of those made it through the process. We continue to see a discussion at the amongst legislators about dispatchable versus renewables. And, our position has always been that every megawatt counts. And I think we're seeing more and more of that discussion in the legislature, but we see some of that, but those didn't really make it far in the process because I think a lot of folks saw the need for everything to be able to participate, and then we had some of these other larger pieces of legislation that were of a higher priority.
Yeah, I agree, because that would have just really stymied the development of wind and as well as batteries and others, solar energy, that sort of thing. So it was kind of discerning that when I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, that's not a good thing. But right, as far as you know, they didn't pass, right?
No, those did not pass. I need to look up 3356. It did not, okay,
It was
got that from Kathy. They did not pass. That one did
Oh,
not get anywhere. No.
715 and 3386, right?
Yeah, it was 819, 715, and 388. Those were the major ones of concern, and those did not pass. So, thank you. So again, those were our pillars. Those were, again, the top line bills, but as you all think of other bills or any more specific things, there was a myriad of other things that we worked on during the legislature, related to a whole host of other topics, not just directly tied to being a gas and electric provider. So we went through the what, and this is the how. This is how we did what we did, and we made sure that we were in alignment not only internally with our executives, but also externally with our community and our industry partners. We have an internal legislative analyst program where we tap over 70 internal colleagues to help us look at the financial, operational, and legal impacts of any proposed bills. Their work helps us make sure we're communicating effectively up at the legislature and providing objective, concise information about a bill's impact. We also provided verbal and written testimony. We were fortunate to have our CEO and our board chair and other board members come up. I believe you all came up. Some of you all came to visit during the legislative session, and I missed a good bulk of that because of my maternity leave, but I hear it was a good time. But we were constantly making sure that we were having those opportunities for real-time feedback and engagement and participation in the process. And on a daily basis, really, it was working in numerous stakeholder groups to provide real-time feedback on legislation, coordinating here in the community. COSA IGR means the city's intergovernmental relations group, so we were always working with our community partners. So where we go from here is a lot of the bills, if not most of them that I mentioned today, are going to require some kind of regulatory rulemaking. And so we will continue the engagement through those processes. David and his team, David Key, my counterpart over energy market policy, they will lead the work that we do engaging in these bills as they go through the PUC and ERCOT processes. We'll also be undertaking an internal compliance process. So not only the bills that have rulemakings, but other bills that will have some sort of change for us. We'll work with our legal and compliance teams and the business units to make sure we all understand what the changes are, when we need to make them and how we can make them going forward. One thing we'll also do is, look at failed legislation, particularly legislation that we had opposition to or had concerns with. We'll be assessing those and determining how we can enhance our legislative education and advocacy work to work with the offices that maybe had some of these bills last time around and how we can work through some of those issues. And then lastly, interim hearings and charges. I'll skip that for a second because we're going to special session, which always delays the interim process. You can't have an interim if you don't get out of session. So special session will start July 21st, and those can last up to 30 calendar days. The pre-filing hasn't started yet, so we're talking a couple weeks away. We haven't seen bills started to file in yet. But as of right now, the agenda is specific to things that the governor has vetoed or believes more discussion is needed on. And he can add to that at any point throughout the special session. As of right now, our topics are not included on there, but we will be monitoring. We will look at any bills that are filed that would apply to us, because members can still file anything they want. And the governor did mention, in light of the catastrophic floods in the Hill Country, that he will be adding something to the agenda related to emergency preparedness or emergency response. He hasn't really, there hasn't been additional detail provided right now, so we will be monitoring that to the extent that there might end up being something that we need to engage on. But once we get through a special session, if we do get into an interim, we will see interim hearings and topics, which will be the things that the legislature needs to look at to get ready for the 2027 session. And so we may see additional conversation on those bills that failed that we were just talking about. But we will be monitoring those topics, and those will be additional opportunities for us to continue the engagement going forward and helping shape what we see in 2027. And with that, in the appendix, there is, this just talks a little bit more specifically about what's in each of our pillars. If you're curious, a little bit more detail, kind of what drove what we worked on going into the session for our public policy agenda. But with that, I don't think I was quick, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm open for questions, although I know we are well over time. Yes, sir.
Yes, so thank you for the presentation. I think we can all agree that the good thing about the legislative session is that it's short, and also that a lot of bad bills fail, but the bad thing is that a lot of good bills also fail. And I was keeping my eye on many of these bills like throughout the session. A pair, because they're often this legislation is filed in like companion, both House and Senate. And so there was one companion pair that failed that would have created the Energy Efficiency Council for the state, and I believe that did not pass. So, would just like to say that hopefully, CPS Energy will continue to advocate for the good policies, especially around energy efficiency, renewables, like protecting, ratepayers, especially residential and the poorest, most vulnerable folks. Obviously, I always bring up the climate crisis and the effects that can have on, our reliability. And obviously also, as we've seen, on people's lives, but just, with regard to CPS's work in making sure that our infrastructure is sound and resilient. I mean, we really need to redouble our efforts to ensure that, the legislature does its job, to keep our infrastructure, resilient, and then also to expand on, like I said, efficiency and renewables. There were some terrible ones that would have killed like a lot of good things that CPS Energy does already. And as far as the special session, it would be good to get an update on that, because we're going to meet again for our subcommittee meetings next month. So if I would like to put that as a request, like on our agenda. I mean, maybe there won't be anything of quote unquote relevance, right? But if there's any activities going on, it would be good to know about that.
Sure, we'd be happy to come back whenever you all would like us to. And to the first question, yes, we didn't really cover it in this presentation, but yes, advocating for demand response and energy efficiency is part of our public policy agenda. And one other thing that I failed to mention under the customer affordability and impacts slide is that we are also always advocating on behalf of our customers, and to the extent that there's potential state dollars, or even at the federal level, federal dollars that could be used by our customers for a variety of programs, we're always trying to find those opportunities as well. So I hear you, because those are things that we had worked on and we will continue to work on through the interim. That, just as much as there's interest in new generation and expanding megawatts and things of that sort, there's also a lot that we can do on the efficiency and the demand response side. That we've done some great things here in San Antonio, and how can we help have that conversation more broadly. And I know the commission too, over time, has been looking at energy efficiency and undertaking some of that work. And if there's follow-up questions on that, we could always talk to David over there and his team, or we can always come back at another point and talk about it. Yes, sir.
I have just a quick overview question.
Uh-huh.
Every session, it seems like we have to protect the municipal position, I guess, in the legislature. And I just wonder, it didn't seem like there was any big push to do anything to limit our ability to maintain that model. But is that true, or were there still some things there that we had to push back on?
There were some that were filed. They did not get much traction. Were there any hearings? Because this would have happened while I was on leave. I don't believe any received a committee hearing. So we do have, some members that they feel very strongly on some of these topics and they file bills, but broadly there was not much interest. This time around, we've seen previous sessions, hearings or forward movement on these, but not this time. And, it was also reassuring to know that we were able to work language into other bills that reaffirmed the authority that we do have over our infrastructure. But that's always something we're keeping an eye on, because it does come up every session.
Carrie, thank you. I
Sure.
appreciate it.
Thank you all for sticking around.
Alrighty, I think that's it, right? So we will see you guys soon at the next subcommittee meeting.